It is the Dean Legge Show, making sure that we're getting sound, etc. here. And it looks like we are. If we're not, how about let me know as fast as you can out there in the world of Twitter, Twitter, and tonight we're just going to do Twitter and YouTube. Keep it simple. I'm just a simple caveman. I can only do so much with all this time. Georgia, South Carolina. Number 3 Georgia at South Carolina. The Gamecocks this week today, because of the holiday that we just had, Labor Day. The rankings came out a little bit, later than you would like to see, but Carolina comes in at number 24. And Georgia and South Carolina will meet at 3:30 on CBS. Dean Legge here joining you inside Dog Post Studios. People are telling me that they are very nervous still about this game. And we're going to have some keys to the game and so forth. If you did not join us Sunday night, Bank South has joined Dog Post to present the 2018 season in many different forms here online. We are very proud to have them on. But one more time here with South Carolina and Georgia, CBS. CBS was very interested to get this ball game, and you can understand why. It draws a huge rating. Now, I'm kind of a ratings nerd, and there's a lot of different things that have not come out. Again, Labor Day goofs up a lot. Most of the time, ratings and rankings, etc., come out on Mondays. But in this case, because of, I was going to say signing day, but Labor Day, so many different things have not yet popped out, and we don't yet know what's going to happen with the ratings or rankings. We now know, the ratings we do not. But anyway, it's a huge game. Georgia is still listed as a 9-point favorite, or is it 9.5? When I'm looking over to the side, I'm looking at another computer, which helps me sometimes take a look at some things that I can't look at this computer. It is solidly now at 10. So Georgia and South Carolina now at 10. And over the weekend, Georgia with a solid performance over Austin Peay. Perfectly adequate performance, I would say. I got to tell you, I think that Georgia right this second looks like the second best team in the country behind Alabama. I watched Clemson. I did not think Clemson looked very good in the first half for what they are. And so I think that that is something that I will be monitoring for family purposes, etc. My wife is a big Clemson fan, as many people know. I didn't think so. I did not think that Clemson looked so hot. I watched some of South Carolina. I should have watched a lot more. But we all only have so much time in the day. And in the case of the South Carolina game, Georgia played right after. South Carolina and Clemson both played at the same time. So I can only see so much of both of the games. But I do think Georgia is sitting at a 10-point favorite to win this game. It opened somewhere around 10 or 10.5. It depended on where you got it. But it has sort of shifted today towards 10, right around noon. And the money line now for Georgia in this game is 400. So you're gonna have to bet 100. You're gonna have to bet $400 to get 100. Georgia, statistically speaking, is at a not quite 80% chance to win this game based on stuff like statistical analysis of college football spreads. It's about 70. It's not quite 78% when you're a 10-point favorite. It's almost an 80% chance to win as a 10.5 point favorite. So they are sitting right on the line there. Their performance, I thought Georgia really did look very good against Austin Peay on Saturday. And I think one thing that will be so critical coming into this game, these are the Bank South keys to the game, all right? This is Georgia, South Carolina. These are the things that I think really matter a lot in this game. Georgia has run for at least 240 yards on every single in every single of these last 3 games against Carolina. So the double-digit wins over the Gamecocks have come as a result of the Georgia run game. So if you're going to need to continue to run effectively, Nick is gone, Sony is gone. You are not as strong at the running back position. That is one thing that I did notice for sure on Saturday. Georgia did not look as strong as you would think they would in the run game. It was noticeable that Sony and Nick were not there, although DeAndre Swift hardly played. I will say that. So if you can set the run and keep it rolling, then you'll be fine. If you are struggling to run the ball, well, you're in real trouble. I think we all know that. Number 2 on the Bank South keys of the game, we're going to have ignore the noise. Now, I have been in this game. I've been to Georgia, South Carolina every year since 1995, and I went to the 1993 game in Athens with Brandon Bennett over the top, or whoever it was over the top there. It is extremely loud at Williams-Brice, no less or more loud than Knoxville or Auburn. Once you can't hear, you can't hear. And the big thing for Georgia is they're going to have to be able to communicate on offense. South Carolina is not going to have that problem in terms of, Carolina will be able to talk. Georgia will not, at least not at the beginning of the game. And if you listen to the roundtable on Dog Post today, you would know from Josh Kendall and I in our discussion of South Carolina, this is really a huge game for Carolina. It's a huge game for Georgia too, but in the pantheon of rivalries, Georgia doesn't. I think most people at Georgia would say this is not a rivalry. It is a game Georgia plays every single season. If they were being honest, if they're going to give you the normal line, then they were going to say, "Oh, it's a rivalry." Well, you're kind of digging into rivalries after a while. That would also sort of suggest that Kentucky and Georgia are rivals in football, and they just really aren't. So this is, though, the number 2 rival for South Carolina behind Clemson. They will be jacked up. Williams-Brice is a tough place to play, no doubt about it. And it's tough to play there because you can't hear. And again, that's not unique to Billy Brice, as they call it in Columbia. It's just you can't hear on the road, you can't hear on the road. So it's not a lot of fun. It's just one of those things that you have to deal with. So hand signals, getting the run game going, established, etc. I don't know that you should, off the bat, think that Georgia is going to immediately run the ball right down South Carolina's throat. I think the big thing is keep calm, let your defense do what it needs to do, which is to get off the field and establish the run game, which speaks to the number 3 Bank South key to the game: be a second half team. And this really will be a lot about, how does Georgia win this game? Need to be a second half team. They need to effectively control the ball in the second half. They need to establish the run game in the first half and then lean on South Carolina in the second half. Once you do that, I am skeptical that South Carolina will be able to stop Georgia's run game over and over again. I think in the first half, it's not easy. It's less difficult to stop the run game of Georgia or whoever in the first half because it's not established. But over time, if you are trying to do something like stopping a 300+ pound man or 2 that are right in front of you with a 215-pound man running at you, that's not an easy thing to do. So that's what I would watch as it relates to this game. Georgia should win this game, and I'm seeing a lot of people on Twitter, on YouTube here talking about their score prediction. If you've got one, throw it up there. Let me see. But I see a lot of sort of double-digit wins, 34-17, something like that. I'm not sure I see South Carolina scoring a bunch of points. Now, Josh Kendall, my old friend who works at the state, he said he thinks it's possible this game could be a higher scoring game, I guess you could say. I don't know. I'm not sure. I do know that Georgia is tough to defend. and they really, this on Saturday, looked like a team that could do a lot of different things offensively. And Georgia's defense basically looks like it's going to be, salty again this year. It really was a very good overall performance compared to a lot of their peers out there. I thought Georgia really handled themselves well. On Saturday, they got in, they got out. Austin Peay, we have no idea if they're good or not. I don't think that necessarily matters. It matters how Georgia plays. I thought they played really well. 3 penalties. I don't recall a turnover. And so you're going into a game against South Carolina on the road that is an important game. You need to have all your ducks lined up in a row. And you need to take care of business completely. Again, the 3 keys are really key. I mean, continue to run the ball. Be effective with the run. I mean, you'd like to see more deep shots, I guess, but deep shots are only great when they work. I mean, just chunking the ball down the field doesn't do a lot of good. If you're not hitting on them, then what good does it do? It is loud in Columbia, no doubt about it. No more or less loud than anywhere else. I've been doing this for 18 years. I'm on the field. I'm not in the press box. So I get a very good sense of what loud is. And Columbia is loud for what it is, for sure. But once you can't hear, you can't hear. Once you can't communicate, you can't communicate. So sometimes I think people in general make too much of that phenomenon. The second half team part is really important. I do think that for Georgia, excuse me, they're going to have to win a lot of these games on the road. These impressive teams that we've seen, LSU over the weekend, Auburn over the weekend, they're going to have to win those games in the second half. There's just no doubt about that. Georgia really, their schedule just became a lot more complicated, didn't it? I mean, the LSU, the Miami debacle was really bad. And then for Auburn, I was not surprised by that. I mean, I picked Auburn to win and cover. It's not surprising to see Auburn do that, be effective in Atlanta against a Washington team that is very good. And then you process it later in the year, later in the week, I should say, listening to analysts from other networks or Sirius XM. And I do think that was a bad week for the Pac-12. There's just really no other way to say it. To lose the most consequential game of the weekend for the team that probably will win the Northern Division. I mean, Stanford will have plenty to say about that, but UW was the top 10 team of the Pac-12 coming in, and they lost to a team that I don't think anybody thinks will win the SEC. They think that Auburn is probably the second or perhaps third best team in the West, but not the best team in the East. All of this matters. All of it nationally matters, because when you've only got 4 spots to go, keeping the Pac-12 out and perhaps the Big 12, although, I mean, I think Oklahoma and Clemson have the easiest, straightforward paths to get there. Ohio State looked good. They did what they had to do, and I think that it's hard to say that someone other than Ohio State right now is going to get there. Maybe Wisconsin, but Michigan State, that was unimpressive. Penn State, that was very unimpressive. And nationally, I do think Clemson will win this week. I am very curious to watch that game on Saturday night. I think 12 points is a lot for Texas A&M to be getting at home. I just don't like that. I think that's too much. Again, it might be. I mean, maybe I have a bias against Clemson all of a sudden. I think I have a bias against bad football. They didn't look good. It's 11.5, 12.5 for Texas A&M, Clemson. I did not think Clemson looked great at all. And I'm not comparing Clemson to their ACC brethren. I mean, they are by far and away the best team in the ACC. Perhaps the only team that can mess with them is Virginia Tech, who barely scored against Florida State. Florida State looked horrible. I mean, they were really bad on offense. But to me, Clemson has a real challenge on their hands, and to win the game, but 12 points on the road. I would either stay away from that game or I would bet Texas A&M. That's what I would do. That is a chunking big line, big old line. Now Georgia's got a big line too. This game, South Carolina and Georgia. I mean, Georgia is a 10-point favorite right now, according to Las Vegas, etc. That's a big line too. I mean, you're not consistently a 10-point favorite on the road in the SEC. And Georgia and South Carolina, again, meeting at 3:00 this weekend. This next guy, he will have a lot to say in terms of how Georgia performs. If Jake Fromm plays basically the same way that he did over the weekend, Georgia's going to win this game. They're going to win it going away. My guess is they win this game something like 27-10. 30-18, something like that. It's not going to be an embarrassing loss for South Carolina. They're too good for that, I think. And I know Georgia has sort of embarrassed a lot of good teams, a lot of decent teams. South Carolina is better than a lot of the teams that Georgia really blew out last year. Vanderbilt, Georgia Tech, Kentucky, even Missouri. I think you have to take South Carolina seriously. They are not a joke. They are a very good program to me for what they are, which is not an elite. They are not an elite national school, but they do have the ability to win this game. I am skeptical it will happen. 10 points again. I know people are gonna say, well, Las Vegas doesn't know anything. They just set lines and all that stuff. All right, whatever makes you feel better and makes you sleep better at night, but it does matter. And if Jake Fromm and company play well on offense, Georgia will win this game. I do not think this is going to become a score fest. Jake, last year this time, they were going to the Notre Dame game, and there just wasn't a lot that Georgia was asking him to do. Now, on the other hand, he was much more active on Saturday than he was this time last year. No surprise. I mean, when you play as well as he did, and like in the Rose Bowl, just the run up to the season, generally speaking. I mean, Jake Fromm is certainly adequately experienced now. He can take on a role that he didn't take on last year, but he's still going to have to perform the way he did. With the exception of one play, and I don't know if you can really get bent out of shape about one play. With the exception of one play, I thought Fromm was he was nearly flawless. And you don't hear me saying that a lot about guys. I mean, I am sometimes a little too critical. I think the guys can take it. They'll be all right. They get coached. But I thought he was almost flawless against Austin Peay. Now, you can be that guy that's like, well, it's Austin Peay. It doesn't matter. Clemson's two quarterbacks were not flawless against Furman. They looked bad, the quarterbacks, in the first quarter. The first half. They just, bad is maybe a stretch. They did not look good in the first quarter, or the first half of that game. If you look at, Penn State, they were not good, just period, as a team on Saturday. So I do think it matters how you play. I don't think exclusively that you have to play. I don't think that it's exclusive that if you beat a good team, that means you played well, or if you beat a bad team, that it's completely dismissed. Having played sports, from my youth all the way through college, it matters how you play. That affects how you feel, and it's important to go execute what you're trying to do. Now, Kirby tonight basically said that they gave the whole rigmarole. He's right, about how tough it is to play in Columbia. It is. And he also said that, the running backs, they've got to hit bigger plays. That's true. I can't remember, and I'm just going to look real quick here. I cannot remember the longest run from a running back, but I will look that up right this second. I know Demetrius had that 72-yarder, and that counts for sure. But the longest run from a running back was James Cook's 36-yarder. DeAndre Swift had a 15-yarder. Justin Fields is not a running back. He had a 17-yarder. So they didn't bust a ton of huge plays, Georgia, on the ground. But when you wind up with 500 yards on offense and 284 yards rushing, it is hard to complain about offensive production. I thought that Georgia looked a lot like they were going to try and slice people up this fall. We will see what happens there. But the only thing from Saturday that sort of they didn't seem as powerful as they have been in the past from the running backs. And that's just me saying it. I mean, like, if people want to get angry about it or correct me, that's fine too. But they didn't feel totally like they were as powerful as they were in the past. I'll keep saying this. I'm disappointed Zamir White is not playing this fall, only because it does seem like this offense, the way they're playing, is dead on what he would be great at. And it's too bad on a lot of different levels. Love Zamir. He is a great kid. And it's just disappointing because he fits right into what they're doing. But Swift does too. So does Cook. Holyfield is a bruiser. I mean, it was a solid effort and day the other night or afternoon, whatever it was, in Athens. All right, I want to talk about the weather a little bit here because I think I'm seeing a lot on YouTube for sure about the weather. Look, for me in this game, you just kind of have to get used to the weather. It was just as hot in Athens on Saturday, 92, with chances of thunderstorms, whatever they're called. So I don't think that that's going to affect the dogs. To me, in my opinion, it's hard for me to say that they will be affected by that. I did not personally think it was that hot outside compared to other situations. It may have been hot. Maybe that's the wrong way to put it. I did not think it was overwhelmingly miserable outside. And that's with lugging around a bunch of camera gear. So I know I get to go inside sometimes, but it never hit me like it was that hot. Now in Columbia, it always seems hotter than the temperature is. But some of that's in people's brains. And it is warm in Columbia. It's a divot. If you were to look at the topography of the earth, Columbia is in a divot, sort of, when you go from Augusta to Columbia, and then you go to Hartsville or Florence from there, you got to go up a pretty big hill to get up to the PD in Columbia. So from Columbia, so they are low lying, and that makes it hotter. It's a tough place to play, not just because of the heat. South Carolina has very passionate fans. They really are very good fans. Sometimes I think it's overdone about their fans. They're not any more or less special than anybody else, but they are very loud for the Chickens when the Chickens play well. In 2016, that was not a very loud crowd. They didn't have much to cheer for, and even when they did cheer, it was almost too late. Georgia, what did they do? They won it 28-14, but they won it, 21-14, and then they kicked an onside kick, and Terry returned it for a touchdown. So Georgia had control of that game nearly the entire time. That was Jacob Eason's worst performance. But this Georgia program has beaten Carolina 3 years in a row by double digits. I don't know that last year was a blowout, but it certainly was a blowout in 15, and I would say it was a pretty solid beating in 16 and 17. So I'm expecting something like that. I just think Carolina right now is in a spot that they, the two teams that they dislike the most are really good right now, and there's nothing they can do about it but go out and win, and they control their own destiny too. I mean, South Carolina wins this game, they still have to deal with Texas A&M later in the season. I think they play. I don't even know who they play from the West. It's not Alabama or Arkansas. It might be State. No, it's Ole Miss. So, those are both winnable games for South Carolina. They've shown that they can beat Florida and Tennessee. They've done very well against them. They have not shown that they can beat Kentucky for some reason, which is really odd. But this is an extremely important game for South Carolina. It's I don't know if it's it probably is all or nothing for Carolina. I'm not sure it's that way for Georgia. Although, if you don't win this game, you're cutting your margin of error paper thin. You're not going to get much credit for. Right now, Georgia's living a lot on what happened last year. And if you are Georgia, you'd better keep winning as much as you can, because Auburn already has a marquee win. LSU has a marquee win. Alabama has half of a marquee win. Clemson should have a marquee win Saturday night, if you want to call it marquee, sort of a half marquee game. But Clemson doesn't play a lot of marquee games. I mean, the one thing that just happened to Clemson was Florida State sucks. That is bad. So there might not be as much margin for error for the Tigers as we thought. But they're living off their past just like Georgia is, just like Alabama is. And you don't want to lose that by dropping a game in Columbia, South Carolina, of all places. The beginning of this season, you want to get through this part, with wins, as many as you can get. Think about if Georgia had lost to Notre Dame last year. The season would have been looked at completely different for a while. So you're going to have to buckle up on Saturday, go out, win the game, be as physical as possible with South Carolina. I think that's the key. Of the three, we're going to review it one more time from Bank South. Really, probably number one should just say be as physical as physically possible against the Chickens. If you can do that, you're not going to have a problem running the ball. Beat them up inside, run through the tackles. I just am skeptical Carolina can keep up with that for 4 straight quarters. I just don't know, y'all. So, secondly, I don't think Jake Fromm or Andrew Thomas, I just don't think those guys are going to have an issue with the noise the way that a traditional young team would. This team is halfway young, but they're not so young. I mean, the guys who have played in a Rose Bowl and a national championship game. So, and the SEC championship game. So they have got plenty of experience in big moments. I'm not sure that it will freak them out that much. And then be a second half team. That kind of goes without saying. That, to me, that means be yourself if you're Georgia. Just go out there and beat the ball up as much as you can. And you should see Georgia win. Not an easy game. This is going to be a competitive game, but it will be a game that the Dogs should win. Join me next Sunday night here online in the Bank South studios, if we want to call it that. Please go check out Dogpost, DAWGPOST.com. Please check out Bank South, banksouth.com. If you've got CDs you're thinking about, if you just want a new bank, that's probably something that I'm looking into here soon. The big banks are only going to do so much, y'all. You can go talk to these people. They are normal people. They're not just going to, they are in your community. Check them out, banksouth.com. It's important to have local relationships in banking. I can tell you, it is important. You guys in business know what I'm talking about. They are business friendly. Dean Legge, Roundtable, check it out. Dogpost.com, check it out. We're going to end this broadcast if I can figure out how. I used to know how to do it by pressing the little buttons on all my social devices, but we're going through a laptop now, so it's a little bit more polished, I guess you could say. We'll see you in Columbia, and we will continue to check out dogpost.com for all your Georgia needs.